Welcome to our filming version of our Friday features. We have with us today Laura Ricketts. Thank you for coming. Laura is a doula by trade, but more specifically a bereavement and loss doula. And I don't know if I've gotten that official title correct, and feel free to correct me. But we're really blessed to have her today. As you know, through what we've been posting on Facebook and social media, that this has been the month of memorial, dealing with infant loss in a variety of ways, and really looking into how does that happen, the frequency of it, the history of our kind of cognitive or us paying attention to it more as a society, and what does the future have? What is research out there telling us? And not just on how it happens, but really what the process is for women, for men, the fathers of the babies as well. So welcome, and thank you, Laura, for coming.
Thank you. I'm really glad to be here.
And well, let's start out by really digging into maybe the history of this. Is we were talking before. I think of, was it something 50 years ago, 70 years ago? Did we become more cognizant as a society to say there are long-term or there are lingering effects to infant loss, and we need to approach that in a different way than maybe we did 50 years ago or 75 years ago? Can you give me a little bit of history and background there?
I think the history of how we perceive and how we handle pregnancy loss in America has morphed, just as the practice of obstetrics has morphed, just as our understanding of what it means to be pro-life has morphed. We've seen an understanding and a compassion for people who experience pregnancy loss grow. I'd say grow exponentially within the last 10 to 15 years. Part of that is because now that we have this social media that allows us to put our stories forward, women are finding out that they aren't alone. Before, we were so interconnected. The idea of losing a baby, early miscarriage all the way through stillbirth, it was something that wasn't talked about. Our grandparents' generation was very private about those losses that they experienced. I remember speaking to even my own grandmother. I never knew that she had had miscarriages until I had experienced my first, because you didn't talk about it. But as women started putting it out there, hey, this is my experience, we've seen pregnancy announcements become a really big thing, right? Everybody loves to do the pregnancy announcement and the gender reveal. Well, technology is amazing. We're confirming pregnancy earlier and earlier. But that also means that if that pregnancy doesn't continue and if that baby passes away, now these mothers who have put it out there already that they are pregnant have to tell people they're not. And so because of, I think our interconnectedness as a society, our social media, our propensity to want to live our lives in public has sort of pushed this forward as something that women now realize needs to be talked about, and there needs to be a response to loss.
Interesting that you'd say all that. I do think that getting it out is in having a conversation, and to, rather than bottling up like our generations before us did, there's something very, very healthy and I think for many, I think revealing the pregnancy early on, and then having to force them to kind of say, well, we lost our child, and to kind of have to deal with that and really share that. They might not naturally want to do that, but it's almost that forced into the next step of dealing with it, I guess.
No, that's true. When I give presentations or talks, I speak on grief, and I speak on how it's important for women to be able to talk about their own experience and to internalize it. And basically, the biggest thing I do is give them permission. I give them permission to talk about their babies, permission to miss their babies, permission to not be okay with losing their babies. And something I didn't expect when I first started giving these presentations was that there would be women who were in their 60s, 70s, 80s at these talks who would come up to me afterwards and say, I lost a baby when I was 22 and I never told anybody. Can I tell you?
Yeah, 40, 50 years of grieving, really.
And that's what it is. It's a suppressed grief, which I think speaks to our need as humans to process and to be able to grieve. And that surprised me. I wasn't expecting that, but it happens every time.
Oh, it's amazing. Yeah, I think that's a great point, that we have to process. We have to do these things, and if we don't, we see it all. I think the higher profile version of that we see a lot is the military post-traumatic stress disorder, right? And that's certainly a real thing, but that's the high profile. That's what we hear in the news. Is there anything like that going on for women when they've received a loss of a child?
Absolutely. In addition to being trained in bereavement and grief, I have background with psychological first aid and trauma. Basically, it's identifying trauma and triaging what that trauma looks like. And for women who experience a loss, particularly if they weren't expecting it, if they were farther along in their pregnancy and they've really had time to bond with their babies, there is an element of PTSD that they have to deal with afterwards. Unfortunately, sometimes that's compounded by the type of medical care they receive as they're going through the process of finding out that their child is no longer living or won't live much longer, and then delivering that baby, and then trying to figure out what you do after you deliver a baby who isn't alive anymore. All of that is extremely traumatizing. Yeah. And the shock of it compounds that trauma.
Right. It is amazing. I think, I don't know, we were talking earlier about the difference between men and women and how they really kind of process this differently, of course. And I think of myself and the losses that my wife and I have had. For me, it's totally different. It's totally different from her. There's a less of an emotional connection that I have, and maybe that's just me as a person. But I think maybe it's also me as a man. Women clearly have much more of a physical connection and an emotional connection. And talk a little bit about that. How have you seen the differences, and how is it being approached for the man and for the father and for the mother?
Grief is a funny thing. It's so individual, but even while it's individual, there are patterns that have to play out if you want to grieve in a healthy way, if you want to heal, right? The purpose of grieving isn't to always just grieve. It's to eventually move into healing.
Right.
But for men and women, fathers and mothers, that plays out so differently. For women, it's very immediate. It's happening to their body. They've already have this connection with their baby. Even in an early miscarriage, there has been so much happening in a woman's brain, in her body, that has been preparing her for this pregnancy, bonding her on a subconscious level with her baby. And so for women, it's immediate and it continues. For men, sometimes they haven't gotten used to the idea of the pregnancy yet. They're still stuck at, oh my goodness, what happened to my wife? Yeah. She's sick all the time. She's eating everything. She's moody. They haven't made the leap where they've started bonding with their baby yet. And that's normal and that's healthy. So when that pregnancy is interrupted, when that baby passes away, mom jumps right into, oh my goodness, my baby. Dad is going, oh my goodness, my wife. Yeah. And for men, a healthy response to anything is wanting to protect, right? That masculinity, that drive to protect your wife and protect your family. And so what I see happen often is that mothers and fathers will feel very disconnected. Yeah. She's experiencing these really powerful hormones and emotions over here. And he's over here feeling helpless because he can't protect her from this. And for my part, what I do if I'm walking with a family through this is really try to encourage them to communicate, but also just point out that men and women are going to handle this situation so differently. Right. And that grief, actual grief for fathers, usually doesn't kick in for 6 months to a year later. It's because they're so present in the moment, right? Wanting to be there for their wives,
Sure.
wanting to keep things even at home, wanting to try to protect her, that the grief is delayed. And that's not unhealthy, it's just reality. I mean, in my own marriage, we've sent 7 children to heaven, and all different ages. And I've seen that play out over and over, where my husband won't start processing it until about a year later. And that's okay, but it's important for mothers and fathers to know that.
Yeah.
So
Set expectations and just know that these things are coming, right? Shifting gears a little bit on cause, how does this happen? Are we finding that in today's day, do we know much? Is there a lot of research on it? On infant loss? Is it happening more frequently now than it was 50 years ago, or vice versa?
It's very hard to pinpoint actual data beyond statistics that are reported to the state. Statistically, loss in America right now looks like approximately 1 in 4 pregnancies will result in the baby passing away at some point. From early on to stillbirth, that kind of encompasses a lot.
Yeah.
So that statistic has held pretty steady over the last 3 to 5 years. And it's changed from 20 years ago. But you have to ask, is that because we are identifying pregnancy earlier? Because, we have all of these wonderful technological advances that let us know when we're pregnant,
Right. And socially, culturally, we're shifting a little bit to reveal earlier.
Right.
And thus, yeah.
And so it's hard to say if that's a drastic increase from what it was. And also because, women wouldn't talk about it.
Sure.
If you were miscarrying, you did so quietly at home and no one knew.
Yeah.
So statistics are hard to come by. Causes are also hard to come by because there are so many different reasons why a baby might pass away before birth. Some of them are physiological. Some of them are chromosomal. Some of them have to do with genetics, with hormones, with any number of causes and reasons. And so it's difficult because we think of pregnancy as being medical, right? And so if it's medical, then there has to be a cure for loss. And it's not that simple.
Yeah.
The best, I think, we can do for women and that women can do for themselves is to try to understand their bodies, understand their fertility, get to know how their body works so they know when it's not quite working the way it should, and not be afraid to seek out information or doctors who are willing to look for causes. In my line of work, it's slightly troubling to me when it takes upwards of 3 miscarriages or losses in a row before your mainstream medicine will say, well, maybe we should try to look into what's causing this. That's 3 too many if they think that there's something that might be done.
So we wouldn't treat that cancer the same way.
Right.
If you're getting 3 tumors or something, we'd dig a little deeper.
Right. And I think it's worth mentioning that advances in hormonal therapies have seen a lot of success in helping women who have experienced pregnancy loss to maintain pregnancy. Progesterone supplementation, making sure that the hormonal balance within her body is where it should be. It's not a fix for everyone. It's not going to cure pregnancy loss, but it is worth noting that has seen a lot of success.
Right, yeah. Prenatal care is definitely, a key thing, I think, as far as certainly a healthy baby, and you have to think it would then correlate into a healthier pregnancy,
right?
And the outcome that we all want. How have you seen in your work? Have you seen? So, what inspired you? Maybe take a step back. What inspired you to get into this line of being not just a doula, but then also a bereavement doula?
So I actually came to being a birth doula second. I started being a bereavement doula first.
Okay.
And a lot of people, I think, have the idea that's because I have lost 7 of my own children. And honestly, that wasn't it. I never wanted this to be a response of my own grief. It's not necessarily healthy to do something just purely out of grief. But it was when I was attending the delivery of a little boy. He was about 14 weeks gestationally, and he had passed away. And he's the son of one of my dearest friends. And being present with her, she had to be induced, which isn't uncommon for a baby that age. But being present with her and just supporting her through that whole process, through her induction, through his delivery, holding him and bathing him, and just presenting him to her, and just being with their family while they said hello to him and said goodbye to him. It was a calling, and that's the best way I can describe it. Mother Teresa talked about her moment where she heard Jesus say, "I thirst." That would be my "I thirst" moment, that women deserve to have someone with them affirming their motherhood, even when they're grieving over that child they wish they could hold. And that's where I started. I started doing my training and taking my classes, and that brought me to where I am now.
It's wonderful. Tell me, are there more? Is there more of a demand? Do you think? Do we need more bereavement doulas because people are asking for and they need that sort of support and help?
Well, I would say yes. I have consulted with women who are experiencing loss all over the country, and if I'm the best they can do, and they're 5 states away, I think there's a huge loss. Even here, my radius driving, I'll drive 3 hours sometimes. This is me. And if 1 in 4 pregnancies is going to result in a baby passing away, then it's not competition. Being a bereavement doula isn't something you do because you're out there to, 1, make money, because that doesn't happen. It's ridiculous, I think, to charge money, when a couple's experiencing loss. But we're also not in competition with each other. Families deserve to be comfortable with the person they're receiving support from, and
absolutely,
the more the better.
Yeah. Kind of going back to what we said earlier, this more awareness of it all. I just think of last night. We shared a story before this, and I'll share it now. Is that it was just amazing to be at the Susan B. Anthony List gala dinner last night, and Kellyanne Conway, the special advisor to the president, was dedicating an award she received to a friend of hers child that had just given birth a week before. And it was a fetal demise. It was that she had gotten the diagnosis back in February that this baby had genetic complications, was not going to survive much beyond the birth. And yet here, on a national front, with 800 people in that, she's telling this story. And that might not have happened 20 years ago, or in 15 years. This is where it's come. We're addressing these issues, and we're really trying to help women really kind of handle these scenarios so they can get them back on their feet again to provide them the healthy recovery that they need, both physically and emotionally, and not just women, as we said, men as well. Where do you see what's missing in the movement of loss and bereavement? Where are the holes? Where do we need to help out more? And maybe where's the future looking at?
I think the biggest hurdle we have to overcome is that we still exist in a society that is not a culture of life, and we have this cultural understanding that birth happens when you want it to, and that death only happens to old people, and that we can somehow control it all. And those are just three very big lies.
Yeah.
Birth doesn't always happen when you want it to, whether it's a happy birth or a sad birth. The idea of control, industries are built off of control, right?
Yeah.
And yet we're not in control. A woman's body is a beautiful, powerful thing, and it's a lie that we tell ourselves to think that we can control these bodies of ours.
Right.
Because if we could, I would be out of a job, right? And death, we don't like to talk about death, especially in America. We're scared of it. We avoid it at all costs. We put it off as much as we can, sometimes in unhealthy ways, and pregnancy loss kind of confronts all three of those lies, and that's very uncomfortable for people.
Yeah.
And so that's one cultural hurdle we have to overcome. And we do that by talking, and we do that by doing what we're doing right now.
Right.
And the other difficulty we face is that, along with being in this culture that lies to us about these truths, we have a culture that still embraces the idea that the unborn are not fully human, that they don't have the same dignity. And
right. So you shouldn't get so upset about something that isn't fully human.
Right.
Right.
How, why are you so sad? You could just try again. You could have another one.
Sure.
When that child, it doesn't matter how old they were,
right.
was a person with all the dignity that you and I have.
Yeah.
And we have to be able to acknowledge that.
And we can't refute what you were talking about earlier. The bond that happens between the woman as that baby is developing in her. That you can't refute that. And the emotions that come along with that. Good, if there's the wonderful outcome of birth and successful birth, and the difficulty when it's a demise. So it's all there. You can't deny that. And I think, as much as society wants to tell, again, just like you said, it's these misnomers, the falsehoods that are being promoted. Well, thank you so much for coming. I really appreciate this. I think you're absolutely right. We need to continue to get out there and let people know that we're there for them. And we here at Divine Mercy Care and Tepeyac OBGYN, we celebrated the lives just last week, really, of women who have had miscarriages over the years, and we had people celebrating the life of losses that were 70 years ago, to as early as last month, and the healing that comes with that is it's a step process, right? It's kind of the crossing that chasm or that river or that creek, and you're just going from one stone to the next, trying to keep your head above water and not get wet. And I know that's not the most straightforward analogy, but I do think that we're trying to just get a little bit better each day and handle the loss each day. So I really appreciate you coming here today. I really appreciate your work, and
Thank you.
And continue to do a great job. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you so much.